Did you know that The Witcher 3 hides one of its darkest quests in one of the most ordinary-looking villages in Velen? No monsters, no witches, no cursed relics. Just a grieving woman, a missing husband, and a silent forest. It begins near Midcopse, where Geralt clears out a camp of cannibals. A few days later, you return and find a woman crying. Her husband went into the woods and never came back. If you choose to help her, you do find him, but he's already dead, torn apart by wild dogs. And when you return to tell her the truth, the quest seems to end. But it doesn't. Not if you come back later. She will go to the area of the corpse and just stand there, which is the end of the quest. It's pretty weird in Witcher to have a quest that has this little content to play. Usually, you'd be running around cows, stealing supplies or killing monsters, so what's the deal with this one? Well, before I get to that, I wanted to mention that if you refuse to help her, the lady will try going to the woods alone and end up dead by the same wild dogs. You can even follow her and watch her demise, and the quest is done, right? Actually, no. You see, if you come back after a few hours to the corpse of the husband, you'll find something really dark and creepy, and that is finding the woman you helped eating the corpse like a cannibal. You don't really see the meat she's eating, but you can see her leaning down and picking up something from the body repeatedly and putting it in her mouth. I assume this is meat, unless her model got bugged and she started collecting herbs at that exact area, which is highly unlikely. This idea of cannibalism isn't as far-fetched as you'd think. Remember I said you had to clear camps of cannibals to get the quest in the first place? I think she's also one of the cannibals, but just not as openly as the others. The weirder part is, I expected her to move once I caught her, maybe even attack me, but she just sits there, eating meat like a lunatic. And yet this isn't the only case of Velen's cannibalistic practice. If you go to the north of Lurch in Velen, you'll see a small, isolated hut that, if you approach, a man will always rush out to attack you. I've seen this guy multiple times in many different playthroughs. However, I never really paid any attention to him. Maybe because it says cannibal on his model, so I just kill him without thinking much. Or because it's Velen and everyone here is a madman. But what I've recently learned, thanks to Ex Latalis, is that this person is not just some psycho cannibal on a mission to kill Geralt. He's scaring the players away from the hut, in which before Geralt appears, he can be seen eating a woman. Pretty damn creepy. But that's not it, because he appears to not only kill the woman, but the man in the hut and even their dog. What's even stranger is that he doesn't even touch the cooked fish on the table and just eats the woman. I honestly can't believe I walked away from such an amazing detail so many times. There is one more interesting interaction with cannibals, not in the cursed land of Velen, but in Hearts of Stone in the quest Without a Trace, in which a herbalist hires Geralt to find his missing apprentice, which, after doing some objectives, leads you to an old couple in the woods. By the look of this couple, they look sweet, or should I say normal. But this view of them quickly changes once you investigate behind the house and find the half-cut and half-eaten corpse of the apprentice. From here on out, you can either kill them or make them promise that they'll abandon their cannibalistic practices forever, which I think is a pretty dumb decision. But do whatever helps you sleep at night. Of course, these decisions have consequences. If you choose to spare the couple and tell the herbalist the truth, he'll pay you for the work, but he swears to seek revenge, which is exactly what he does. Because if you go back to the old couple's home after a few days, you'll see Ulguls eating their corpses, to which Geralt says,
"Whoa. Herbalist wasn't joking."
But if you kill the cannibals, tell the herbalist the truth, and return to the home, you'll see the same monsters, but Geralt will say a different line.
Devoured by necrophages. Poetic justice at its best.
There is also a third outcome, which happens if you spare the couple and tell the herbalist that you killed them. This way, when you return home, you'll find out the old woman died due to hunger. I guess I find it to be satisfying that there isn't really a good ending for the couple. For my playthrough, I just killed them, because that's the best way to get rid of cannibals. It's so annoying running to the castle in Crow's Perch whenever you want to get your loot, because the closest fast travel sign drops you at the bridge, meaning you have to make that long run every single time. But most people don't know that in the next gen update, if you complete the Velen storyline along with Bloody Baron's questline, a new fast travel sign will be added to Velen, right in the heart of the castle. No need to run around peasants and hissing cats anymore. But here's the thing. no one tells you. A peasant can be seen building the new signpost before you complete the required quests. It's an amazing little detail and a very helpful sign. And since we're in Crow's Perch anyway, let's talk about the Bloody Baron questline, which is actually inspired by the true Slavic folklore, most specifically, the botchling part of it. It is said that children who die without a name haunt their families. The developers found it so interesting that they had to delay the game just so they could perfect the tone, writing, and consequences of the quest even further. But they didn't just copy and paste the folklore into the quest. The game toned down the horror to add an impactful and emotional story, which makes the Bloody Baron quest one of the, if not the most, memorable quests from The Witcher 3. The Baron carrying the botchling part was such a powerful and emotional scene that Paul Sasko, the quest lead designer, said a man reached out to CDPR to express how deeply the Bloody Baron story affected him after losing his wife and child during childbirth. There is a small little detail in the quest that very few seem to have noticed. Interestingly, during the quest, just before the botchling part, Geralt tells Baron to order everyone to put a line of salt outside their doors, and sure enough, if you look closely, you'll see a line of salt outside the homes in Crow's Perch. But the thing that most people don't know is that Geralt is not the kind of person to suggest such stuff. He thinks stuff like putting salt to drive away ghosts is pointless. This fact is backed by his own dialogue in the Witcher contract, Door Slamming Shut, where when entering a seemingly haunted house, Geralt spots a line of salt in front of the stairs and says,
"Scattered salt. Probably to drive ghosts away. Pointless superstition."
So this leaves the question, why did Geralt tell the Baron to do it? There is no accurate answer to it. But what I think is, since the botchling part is quite sensitive and dangerous, Geralt used this superstition to keep the villagers, who easily believe in such stuff, at home and away from harm. If it was not to keep them home, then it was probably to hide the fact that Baron was dealing with a botchling. And in that part, if you don't calm the botchling down, you have to fight it in its full form, which I think was pretty interesting, and even though it's pretty simple, not a lot of players have tried it. Most of The Witcher 3's monsters are taken from Eastern folklore, with a mix of CDPR's fantasy, such as the Leshen, which is based on Leshy, a forest spirit in Slavic mythology that can change forms and lead people astray. Hearing it here might not sound as scary, but encountering it in-game is one of the most frightening experiences I've had in Witcher, especially in earlier levels. The beastly roar and the howl of winds are enough to make you walk the other way. Something, however, I'll always come and kill every single time are the water hags, which are drowned spirits in Eastern Europe, originally known as the Boogie Women, infamous for luring in children or careless travelers. Their lore aside, it's funny how the game describes them in the bestiary, clowning on them for looking the way they are and their objectives of attracting men, with the skin color of a long dead cadaver and stinking of muck and fish. These are not my words, but the game's. I think they hate them just as much as I do. Reading the bestiary is certainly important since most first-time players have no idea you are supposed to fight a werewolf with moondust bombs, which stop the werewolves from regenerating health mid-fight, making them almost impossible to kill in earlier levels without the bombs. The game will usually lead Geralt to Velen, then Novigrad, and finally Skellige. But the beauty of the game is that you don't really need to follow this route. You can just start your journey from Skellige or Novigrad, whichever you prefer. It's amazing how much freedom the game has, even in how you approach the story. But I wouldn't suggest starting from Skellige unless you guys are running mods, because enemies in there might be too much for a low-ranking Geralt. But there is a big truth, and a fact that a lot of players miss, even after 100 hours, is that you can actually stop a cat from hissing at you. Simply use the Axii spell on it, and it will become friendly and even follow Geralt for a little while. Now think of my surprise when I found out this same spell contained wild horses and let you ride them. Pretty cool, right? Which also reminds me of the fact that if you use the Protest Inquisitor from Yennefer on cats, Geralt will react. His voice lines from the quest even kick in, saying,
"Getting warmer. Warmer."
when getting close to the feline. No idea why, but it's funny nonetheless. Roach, Geralt's trusty steed, has tons of bugs even now, but the most famous ones was of him spawning on top of houses when being called by Geralt. This gave birth to thousands of memes, which ultimately got the attention of CD Projekt Red, who went on to immortalize the meme by adding this joke in the form of a card illustration in Gwent. I've also had my fair share of bugs with Roach, but the funniest one was when I swam to the edge of the sea, past the map. The game started to bug out and not render terrain properly, and way off in the distance, there was Roach, just chilling in mid-air. The devs intentionally left his AI imperfect because it felt too unnatural to have a horse that was robotic and perfect. It certainly adds to the immersion of the world when you call out Roach and he ignores you, because he's a stubborn bastard designed to be like that. There are plenty of times CDPR has openly admitted to Roach doing dumb stuff. Actually, this is the perfect time to mention when Roach started talking with Geralt. And one of the first things Geralt asks her is,
You cross the ocean when I call sometimes, but then get hung up on the tiniest fence. What's that about?
This all happens in the quest Equine Phantoms, from the Blood and Wine DLC, given to the player by Panastri at her hermitage. So the gist of it is that a hermit is haunted by a demon that can only be seen after drinking a Grey Top, and once Geralt drinks it, he can talk to animals, especially his trusty buggy horse Roach, which sounds more like a stallion than a mare, and a really talkative one at that. Quest aside, talking with Roach and her roasting Geralt is one of the most wholesome and hilarious interactions I've ever had in this game. There is so much comedic dialogue between those two in the quest that I'll probably have to make a separate video just to cover it. It's honestly just amazing. Talking about Gwent and popularity, Gwent was originally made by a small team of developers who thought it would be fun to make a little minigame, not knowing it would become one of the most popular minigames in RPGs, so much so that it spawned a standalone title named Gwent, the Witcher card game. I find it soothing to my soul that Gwent has become so popular and detailed. Players spend a dedicated playthrough of The Witcher 3 finding Gwent players to beat and cards to collect. The initial release wasn't supposed to feature Gwent. The minigame was made later into production, and there was a serious debate on whether to add it to the game at this point or not. However, since the devs themselves were addicted to it, they went on with adding it to the game. An important decision, I'd say, considering that many players have separate playthroughs just dedicated to Gwent. There was supposed to be a Skelligan deck for the base game as well, but it was cut from the final game due to pacing issues. This set included the following cards: King Bran, Krakon Crate, Ice Turasash, Ermion, Drake Bondu, Madman Lugos, Holger Blackhand, Donan Hindar, Udalric, Yalmar Uncrate. From the list, Michael Steck had completed concepts for King Bran and Ermion cards, but couldn't make it to the final game. However, most of these are now available in the Blood and Wine DLC. Along with other masks like the wolf and bird ones, there was supposed to be a pig mask as well, but it was cut from the original game. There's no solid reason as to why it didn't make it, but it was probably cut for how creepy it looked on Geralt. A red pig mask with a bright red tongue, something straight out of a scary Halloween movie. It's pretty wild how a lot of people have no idea why Geralt has two swords. The silver one is for monsters, and the steel one is for humans. Having the steel sword adds to the reasons why most people are afraid of witches. Even in the opening tavern cutscene in White Orchid, most NPCs run away after finding out Geralt is a witcher. This wasn't because Geralt had just killed 3 men in front of them, but because witches were seen as freaks who could kill anyone and anything for coin. To the folks, there were no nice witches. To me, this also explains why Geralt had a cloak in the opening cutscene. It was to hide his steel sword when searching for Ciri. I can see the reason behind this. Anyone who finds out you're a witcher either wants to kill you or thinks you'll corrupt their mind. Talking about swords reminds me of how the combat could have been so much more detailed. But would it be better than what we have right now? You be the judge of that. The combat was supposed to have a monster anatomy scanning system for Geralt, which would allow players to scan the skeleton of an enemy enemy and be able to select a certain bone, tendon, or weak point to attack. This was an early thought from the developers to highlight Geralt's craft as a skilled monster slayer. However, it was scrapped completely since it made the combat too slow, sluggish, and not a good fit for the fast-paced gameplay the team envisioned. Think of it like Fallout combat with swords. Though combat is a pretty big part of the game, compared to the next fact, it wasn't as big. It's honestly crazy that The Witcher 3 was initially planned not to have an open world. CDPR intended the game to be linear like Witcher 2, but with more vast areas than the previous game, and still not seamless like the final product. However, CDPR was influenced by games like Skyrim and Red Dead Redemption, and decided to just go fully open world, which was, of course, a challenge on its own. If they had decided to go on with their original plan, I probably wouldn't even touch the game after my first playthrough, because it's the map and exploration of The Witcher 3 that keeps bringing me back to it. No matter how many times I tell myself, this is it, I won't do another playthrough, I end up going back to the game just because I missed a certain quest or didn't explore a certain point. But an explorable map is not the only thing that makes a game good. I can name a million games that have good maps, but when it comes to quest design, they just fail, and I've rarely ever felt that in Witcher 3. The only other game with a similar quest design that comes to mind is probably Skyrim. The reason for this amazing quest design is that everything you see is hand-placed. Nothing is generated by a computer to be randomly there. The devs initially tried following Skyrim's infinite quest pattern, where the system would generate random quests that never ran out, but that resulted in unsatisfying quests that quickly bored the team. So what did they do? They made each quest on their own, placed each prop by hand, and intentionally added multiple ways to complete a quest. It's for that reason the game has so much detail and so much hidden content that we find randomly, because a member of the team had a crazy idea and added it to the quests. Miles Tost, the lead quest designer, said in an interview, "We wanted to make everything by hand and make sure everything is unique, to keep up the player's sense of excitement while exploring the world and a sense of wonder. Even if you see something familiar on the horizon, it should still be worth exploring. You should be able to find something interesting. You heard it, boys? Go explore the world of Witcher 3. The original E3 trailer of The Witcher 3 was entirely in animation. Even the gameplay you see during the trailer was made by the studio's animation team as a vision of what they were aiming for to deliver upon release. You can see the game looking more like Witcher 2 than 3. The art style and gameplay look very similar to the previous game. Even Geralt looks different from the final product, which is why if you compare the 2013 E3 trailer with 2014's, you'll see a massive upgrade. A hilarious encounter occurs if you visit the Oxenfurt market after acquiring more than 35,000 coins via illegitimate means. Geralt will be confronted by a tax collector who will ask you various questions about how you got the money. It's something out of the blue that most players don't expect, and I certainly didn't. It's the game's way of saying, we know you cheated. You know what's really disturbing? Realizing that Philippa has gemstones in her eye sockets in Witcher 3. This is a direct result of King Radovid's hatred of the sorceress in Witcher 2, where he ordered his men to gouge out the eyes of Philippa, a high-ranking sorceress, which is why in Witcher 3, she always has a scarf wrapped around her eyes. I don't remember if we ever saw her eyes in Witcher 3 or the gemstone, but some concept art for the game proves this fact. Some sorcerers were able to restore their eyesight, and the eyes too. The best example of this is Yennefer after the Battle of Sodden, but in her case, the eyes were still intact. So who knows what will happen with Philippa, but some dialogues in the game suggest her eyesight is slowly healing. Philippa's fate is haunting, but speaking of hidden details, there's one reference that ties Witcher 3 to a whole different universe. During a dialogue with Syrric, she describes traveling to a world where people had metal in their heads and flew ships through the sky. It's likely a reference to Cyberpunk, given that both games come from the same developers, but that's not the interesting part. CDPR was planning on adding a scene where Geralt would have visited Night City when traveling worlds with Avallac'h. You see, the script was made back in 2012, 3 years before The Witcher 3 was released, and the plan was to showcase their upcoming title, Cyberpunk, though it was taken out since Cyberpunk was facing problems at the time. But some dialogues have been data mined. The lines were, Geralt, what is this place? Is this the afterlife? Avallac'h, no, just another of the realities the spiral leads through. Technologically advanced, but broken. Dying. Geralt. Disgusting. This stench. Noise. How can you live here? Avalak. You should know better. This world is inhabited by humans, not elves. Maybe Night City wasn't as beautiful as it is today, or maybe Geralt was just pissed at taking portals, but he certainly didn't like that world. However, something I'm sure Geralt enjoyed was performing the famous Leap of Faith. You can perform it on the top of Longlock's tower in the Blood and Wine DLC. There's a wooden beam that seems very similar to the synchronization points from the Assassin's Creed series. Geralt can dive off of it, but unlike the dead assassin Easter egg from Witcher 2, Geralt survives. The same DLC also references Dark Souls in the Beyond Hill and Dale quest. You can take a certain bridge just before the castle gates to reach a bonfire with a sword on it, a clear nod to one of the gaming's all-time greats. What's even cooler about this one is that, just like Dark Souls, you respawn to this bonfire when restarting the checkpoint. This is by far my most favorite Easter egg from the game. Plus, you also get an epic sword from it. And talking about Easter eggs, I have to put in the Tyrion Lannister Easter egg from Game of Thrones. For this, you have to go over to a prison island in Skellige where, inside a cell, you'll see the dead body of someone very familiar to Tyrion Lannister. Now, it's not fully confirmed to be him, but the Lannister color of crimson on him and similar facial structure prompts me to believe it's an homage to the famous series. Manticores were supposed to be an enemy in the game and were meant to have a nest in Kaer Morhen, but were cut before the final release. In the same Kaer Morhen, Lambert was supposed to die along with Vesemir, without a choice on whether the players were able to save him or not. This was later changed. It's sad we never got to go out against this majestic beast, but not as sad as the next fact. Probably the saddest moment of the entire game is seeing Vesemir die, though it was pretty epic watching him stand his own against Eredin and Immelrith. But there is a sad little dialogue that almost all players have missed. Just before the fight, after you recruit allies for the battle, you can talk to Vesemir about the upcoming battle. He'll tell you if things go south, just take Ciri and run. Obviously, Geralt disagrees with this, saying he won't ever abandon him, to which Vesemir replies,
"At times, you can't win without making a sacrifice."
Notice how he didn't say sacrifices, but rather one singular sacrifice. These are kind of his last words, and a big foreshadowing of the battle. Most likely, Vesemir knew he wouldn't survive this battle, or at least planned on stopping the Wild Hunt with his last breath. In the same conversation, Geralt can pick the "why are you rebuilding Kaer Morhen" dialogue, to which Vesemir will answer that he refuses to sit and watch these ruins, which were the result of a massacre in Kaer Morhen. This is pretty interesting, and most new players have no idea what Vesemir is even talking about, so let me fill you in. A long time ago, when Geralt was young, there was an attack on Kaer Morhen by peasants who hated the witches from the bottom of their hearts. Their hate was fueled even further by some literature that spoke ill of the witches, saying that humans turning into monster-killing machines is not what the gods want. The mob attacked Kaer Morhen, killing multiple teachers and students in the process. Of course, these peasants weren't enough to take down the fort, so they begged the mages to help them. It was canonically a big blow to the Witcher school of Wolf, and only a handful of witches survived the attack, including Eskel, Lambert, Vesemir, and Geralt. It's a pretty fire reference to the event, inviting players to read about the history of this once great fort. These ruins remind me of a brilliant detail that if it wasn't there, no one would have noticed, but CDPR went the extra mile. If you remember the part where you follow Lambert to his boat in the final trial quest, they both walk past a broken wall, called the Savilar's Breach, which is a reference to the events of Witcher 1, when Savilar shattered that certain wall to get inside Kaer Morhen. However, in the prologue of Witcher 3, where you race Ciri to the training yard, you can actually ignore the race and just go to the corner of the courtyard, where the wall is still intact, simply because this prologue is a dream of Geralt set before the events of the first game. So that wall hasn't been destroyed yet. It's honestly insane that this is in the game. Like, who came up with this? I might be exaggerating a bit, but this is a work of art, and it's beautifully close for players who have played the first game. Okay, there is one more thing I have to cover before we move on from this quest, and it's that in the same quest, when you get to Lambert's boat, if you don't get in and take a long swim to the objective, there was supposed to be a cool little cutscene that plays where Lambert asks Geralt,
"Have a nice swim? Water not too cold for you?
And if he had a fun swim. The cutscene ends with Lambert calling Geralt,
"You're one strange duck."
I don't really see any reason as to why it was removed, but CDPR sure knows us well and how we just mess with the game's objectives. Talking about messing around, the next fact kinda rewards you and punishes you at the same time. When you kill cows for crowns, meditate, and kill them again numerous times, the game sends Chort, a cow monster, to hunt you down. It's the devs basically saying, stop exploiting the game. At the time, if a player managed to kill the Chort, another one would spawn until the player died. This, however, was patched due to high-level players who were able to kill a Chort easily and who were using this to exploit even more crowns, as the Chort had more rare resources to sell. As of now, a Chort does appear, but if you manage to kill it, another one won't appear until Geralt leaves White Orchid and returns. This backfired badly, but I mean, what were the devs even thinking? There's no good way of stopping players from exploiting. That's the nature of sweaty RPG players. No offense. The weather in the game is not just for show, it affects immersion and monster spawns. Wraiths and foglets are more likely to appear on foggy nights, although fewer paranormal experiences may occur on clear ones. As anyone who has ever tried riding a real horse in bad weather knows, Roach even reacts to thunderstorms by becoming agitated and refusing to remain motionless. Although most players overlook this kind of small detail, it demonstrates how deeply CDPR went into creating a sense of life in the game. It's small facts like these that add so much life to the game's immersion, like the small detail in the next fact that most have no idea about. We see Ciri most of the time with her top button undone, exposing her breast, which is actually intentional and there is a good reason for it. In the Hearts of Stone DLC, when Gaunter leaves a mark on Geralt, he asks Ciri if it looks bad, to which Ciri replies,
"You know, folk would stare at the scar on my cheek, always. It used to upset me greatly.
And?
I started undoing one shirt button more. Problem solved."
Hence the reason she keeps her top button undone. So Roach can kick enemies, we all know it, of course. It isn't a feature you should rely on since it requires timing, angle, and Roach's fear meter to be in perfect sync for it to happen. However, a pretty cool fact is that Roach can knock down werewolves in one shot, allowing Geralt to finish them off like other enemies. What's even cooler is the fact that Roach is the only one able to do this in the game. Not even Geralt with his infinite spells and potions can knock down a werewolf, so next time you're having a hard time fighting them, just whistle. There was supposed to be a Nilfgaardian camp in Skellige, but it was removed from the base game. Some suggest it was a large outpost with hundreds of Nilfgaardian soldiers. Whether that's true or not, no one knows for sure. I, for once, would have enjoyed another camp, since my third playthrough was basically killing every soldier on sight. If you wear the Nilfgaardian armor and pass by soldiers or NPCs in different regions, they will use dialogues like Nilfgaardian mutant, or not only mutant but a Nilfgaardian too, get out of our city. It's the small details like this that give the world of Witcher 3 an incredible sense of immersion. It's pretty embarrassing to admit, but for my first playthrough, I had no idea Roach can sprint infinitely. All you have to do is double press whatever button you use to get Roach into the gallop, then follow the road and hold the sprint button, and that's it. Roach will sprint endlessly as long as he's following a road. It does make things easier in quests where you have to follow NPCs on horseback and Roach always ends up tiring out, though it is also pretty annoying because for some reason Roach always takes the wrong path between a fork. During the Var Faela Lane quest, when Yennefer tries to undo the curse on Umar, there was supposed to be an instance where Yen asks Geralt to make some food for her.
Something light. Scrambled eggs, perhaps? Or an omelette, if you wish to spoil me.
However, this was only triggered if Geralt was in a romantic relationship with her. You could have either put in the effort, or brought her something inedible, though the second option wouldn't be out of character, given that Geralt is canonically a terrible cook. If you did manage to prepare a proper omelette and present it to Yennefer, she'd actually compliment Geralt for the effort.
Oh, decided to put in the effort. Thank you.
It was a small, warm mini-quest that added a new layer of immersion in their relationship. Sadly, most players never got the chance to see Geralt cook. Good news though, you can still enable this in-game at the start of the quest with the following console command: add fact, open bracket, Q401_cooking_enabled, close bracket. In the same quest, Yen asks if Geralt can use peppers to make the omelette, but the thing is, there are no peppers in the game. The ingredient was likely only made for this specific part of the quest. Since the entire quest is scrapped, I guess they removed the peppers as well. Letho the Kingslayer from Witcher 2 is actually a pretty big character in The Witcher 3 if you do things right. If you spared him in the second game and import your save to Witcher 3, or if you answer the proper answers to the Nilfgaardian Chamberlain's interrogation, then he shows up in a quest called Ghosts of the Past, where he's being hunted by bounty hunters. Geralt can leave him or help him. Either way, it's amazing to see CDPR value past decisions. But the fact that all of this can be missed entirely if you simply answer no to the Nilfgaardian Chamberlain is insane. The game completely removes him from the game, removing the quest in the process. After completing Letho's quest and deciding to help him, players can invite him to fight alongside them in the Battle of Kaer Morhen. He serves as a huge ally, and it's just an overall fanboy moment to see the Kingslayer fight once more. If you miss the initial prompt of bringing him to the game, you also lose the opportunity to see him in Kaer Morhen. After the Battle of Kaer Morhen, most of the witches will leave the area. Vesemir dies, Eskel and Lambert leave for their quests, and every person you invited to help you against the Wild Hunt goes back to their life. The only person who decides to stay in Kaer Morhen is none other than Letho. I love his character so much. Talking about characters from Witcher 2, Lorveth was supposed to be a big part of Witcher 3. His questline was centered around the Nilfgaardian War and an outbreak of Catriona Plague. He would have been a part of Roke's alliance, along with Vess and Taylor, but the entire questline, along with the character, was scrapped due to it not sitting well with the story and requiring extensive work. Apparently, it had its own team of writers and designers. Well, at this point, you can easily tell how much I love characters that appear in Witcher 3 from the past games. If you liberate an unmarked village in Velen, you'll find something interesting among the NPCs that inhabit the place. A brickmaster who stutters, most famous for using the words ba ba ba, the fans of the original game already know who I'm talking about. This brickmaster is the same one from the swamp outside Vizimar in Witcher 1, who tells you his sad backstory of how he was playing by throwing a brick in the air and then counting to 5. Unfortunately, the brick fell on him, damaging his brain and speech. It's these smaller character appearances that warm the heart of OG players. But since The Witcher 3 is made to be kind of a standalone game and an entry point for new fans, most players have no idea about these iconic characters. The unsettling crones of Crookback Bog, Bruess, Weavess, and Whispers are not entirely new conceptions. They're heavily reflective of Eastern Slavic folklore concepts, especially the concept of forest witches who would lure, eat, and manipulate villagers. Their designs also draw inspiration from Baba Yaga myths of a witch who lives in a hut that rests on chicken feet. The bog hut that you stumble upon in their questline is a direct reference to that myth. CDPR fused myth with their dark twist to create villains who feel both comfortable and foreign all in one. It certainly feels like they've been given special treatment by the devs. Their soundtrack, boss fight, and the entire questline is special. I honestly think they're the best villains in the base game. You can find a 1568 artwork in Peter Bruegel the Elder's paintings that looks very similar to the 3 witches from Crookback Bog. Many believe this to be an inspiration for the witches. There's something very eerie about the artwork. It looks simple but feels cursed. Take a look for yourself. But the crones aren't just grotesque folklore brought to life. They're part of something far darker, something that hinges on the choices you make in one of the game's most unforgettable quests, the Whispering Hillock. It's darker than you might think. It's a quest with no good answer, as said by CDPR themselves, to remind people that the world of Witcher is dark and wicked, not some hero tale. There are plenty of consequences, so I'll just go over them one by one. In Velen, there's a tree spirit that claims to be falsely imprisoned, asking Geralt to set it free. The game will then give you 2 choices, either kill her or free her. If you decide to free her, the tree spirit will slaughter the villagers of Downwarren crone, but will save the orphans in Crookback Bog. And if you decide to kill it, you are choosing to kill a being that may have been falsely trapped in the barren evil land of Velen. Sure, the villagers will be spared, but the orphans will ultimately be eaten by the crones. So what really is the right choice? Simply put, nothing. This is the type of dark writing that puts The Witcher 3 above others. I did my first playthrough of this quest, not even knowing what consequence each choice has, so I just killed her. Now that I've done plenty of playthroughs, I'd say killing her was the right choice. However, this is obviously subjective. The down war and slaughter doesn't even trigger until the player goes back to the first area, making it one of the most hidden story branches in Velen, since most players don't even go back to the village after the quest. The people of the village describe a black mare that appeared randomly, which caused the mothers to crush the skulls of their babies, and the family members to kill each other, until only a few survived. This black mare was, of course, the spirit of the tree. The choice of saving or killing the spirit has even further consequences, because the entire Baron questline depends on it. If the spirit saves the orphans, Anna, Baron's wife, is turned into a water hag, which leads Baron to hang himself. Pretty dark, and that final cutscene of Anna is by far the most unpleasant cutscene to watch in Witcher. However, if you kill the spirit, the children do die, but Anna survives, so does the Bloody Baron, who takes her away from Velen to find a cure for her mental troubles. This does sound like the better choice, right? Yet if you go back to Crow's Perch without the Baron, there is no order. You'll find his men pillaging and murdering, raping women, and doing so as they please. If it's any comfort to you, the orphans do reappear later in the game in Novigrad, where they're taken care of by Marabella. There is no quest marker pointing you towards the orphanage, but if you explore Novigrad enough, you'll eventually find them. It does serve as a big relief later in the game if you choose to save them. I'd say this quest is more difficult to complete after the first few playthroughs, when you finally understand all the consequences, making it arguably the best quest in Witcher 3. These consequences aren't hard to find. You're practically bound to find new content when making different choices in your second playthrough, but there is still hidden lore revolving around this quest that can be missed no matter how much you play the game, like the She Who Knows book, which basically reveals the identity of this spirit and how the crones are related. The book is written to make the crones look good, like some kind of deities sent to save Velen. Of course, we all know this isn't the truth. The book mentions a mother known as She Who Knows, which obviously is the spirit in the tree, and that she had 3 daughters, the crones, who all came from lands far away. It's mentioned that the crones and their mother helped Velen at first, but as time went on, the mother became evil and started to corrupt the land. This resulted in the crones killing her and imprisoning her soul beneath the Whispering Hillock. This claim is also backed by some dialogue in-game, but whatever the case may be, one thing is true: both the crones and the spirit are evil. I feel like this isn't enough of a reason to feel good about either choice, but it's good to know some backstory before confronting the spirit. This book can be found in random places, like Yennefer's room in Skellige, the library in Vizimar, or in Novigrad as well, so be sure to read this. But that's not the only book that presents the crones as angels watching over Velen. Before the end of the quest, Wandering in the Dark, Kira Metz will give Geralt a book called The Ladies of the Wood. I'm sure you can figure out who it's about. Anyway, if you read it, the book talks about the crones in almost fairy tale tones, calling them protectors of the forest, and even going as far to say the gods have abandoned Velen and only the ladies of the woods are worth worshipping for how generous they are. The book even tells you how to beg and help the ladies of the woods, and it goes like this: find a child, young and innocent, and take it to Crookback Bog. Search out the Ladies' Shrine. This is where the trail of treats begins. Set the child off on the trail, and it shall follow its sweet track and find the good ladies. The child will never want for anything ever again, for the ladies are kind and generous. I don't have to tell you how far from reality all of this is. The ladies are corrupt and eat children, we all know that. It's a trick book from CDPR showing how folklore can be romanticized by peasants who are on the verge of giving up, finding anything to believe in, to somehow turn their lives around. The crazy thing about the crones is that villagers swear swear they are the prettiest beings on the earth. A good example of this is if you go back to the village of Downwarren, assuming you haven't freed the spirit, because otherwise most of the villagers will be dead, you can talk to the alderman again, and Geralt tells him about his experience seeing the crones, describing them as hideous beings with robes and human bones for clothes. To which the alderman says that
Festac must addle your city folks' brains. I ain't seen all the ladies, true, but the Wispass, she's shown herself a true beauty, that.
because he has seen at least one of the crones, which is Wispas, and calls her a true beauty. He's likely seen one of the fake images of a beautiful young woman that the crones use to lure people, like the one used by them in Bold Mountain, or believe in the word that's being spread around the area. I mean, if they really looked like that, I would have been head over heels for them. We all know how ugly they truly are. Another good example of this type of quest design with no good ending is the Hazardous Goods quest, where you rescue a man from necrophages. After the fight, the man thanks you for helping him, and when Geralt asks about whether he had an illness recently, the man replies with,
"No illness ever holds me."
but if you visit him later, you'll see that the plague has infected him. He stands near a hut crying and asking Geralt to kill him before the plague does. Now what do? If you kill him, you can use Igni to sterilize the plague from his body, and if you don't kill him, the man dies on his own later. It's a cruel reminder that Velen is cursed. Not everyone Geralt helps lives happily ever after. If Velen's tragedies taught us anything, it's that every part of the continent carries its own scars, especially places steeped in legend like Skellige. The part of Hjalmar looking for the frost giant to slay is a direct nod to Norse legends of humans fighting frost giants. In keeping with actual Norse burial traditions, Skelligers also honor the culture by sending their deceased out to sea on burning boats. This occurs at King Bran's burial just at the beginning of Skellige's first quest. Skellige's weather is intentionally made harsher and stormier to reflect North Atlantic inspirations. You can even find shipwrecks on the beaches, referencing Viking history and the treacherous Atlantic seas. The same beaches also hold massive whale skeletons, which isn't tied to any quest, but is a reference to the harsh whaling culture of the time. Skellige is amazing, though it's sad that it didn't receive the same attention as Novigrad and Velen. The devs even had to remove 2 unique locations from the continent. One was Dalvik, a village, and the other was a floating market with conjoined ships off the coast of Ardskellig. The second one would have been unique to explore, but I guess we won't get the opportunity. However, one thing we can witness, although you have to be pretty lucky, is the midnight ghost ship that appears out of the fog and sails silently before vanishing. There is no quest tied to it, and no explanation. It's just there for explorers to find. It took me several playthroughs to hunt it, and I have to admit, it's one of the most stunning encounters I've experienced in a game. Everything about it is beautiful. The starry night, the ghostly blue look, and how it dives back into the water. CDPR confirms they added it as a small detail that makes the Norse-inspired Skellige feel more alive. It's a reference to the ghost stories of the culture. Witcher 3 had many monsters that couldn't make it to the final game. These monsters had artworks, lore, and purpose, but were scrapped for various reasons. Most notable, and the one I would have loved to see more than any monster, was the Hanged Man, created from men hanged in the war. He was supposed to suffocate Geralt with his hands and ropes. The artwork for it is terrifying. Another great monster removed was Nidhogg, a dragon from Norse mythology that Geralt was supposed to fight against in a cut quest where Yennefer would trap the players on an island in Skellige. The only 2 options to escape were either to complete the trials of the island or slay this dragon. Nidhogg does appear as an opponent in the Witcher adventure game and is pretty hard to defeat. However, the only reason we even know about it being in Witcher 3 was through leaked material. The attack moveset of Nidhogg would have been far more vicious than any other boss in the game. It was said to be aggressive towards the player and would have been able to fly around, perform fast close-range attacks, regenerate health, and ignite the area around Geralt. Sounds like a good fight, but sadly, we can't experience it. Some of the other monsters that were cut were... Bruxa was also cut from the base game, even though the same monster was seen in a pre-launch trailer for The Witcher 3. However, she does appear in Blood and Wine as one of the first bosses you fight. Most fans of The Witcher 3 will remember Priscilla's song in Novigrad, the mournful ballad that plays during her performance. What many likely don't know is that Priscilla's song was written in Polish, and that CDPR spent weeks attempting to write a version of the lyrics in English that had the same emotional potency. They rewrote it multiple times with different singers until they got a good result. The song was originally a tribute to Yennefer and Geralt's love story, but is presented in the game in a way that makes it seem like it's intended for Geralt and Triss. This intentional double meaning is one of the reasons why it hits so hard emotionally, as it comes across as a love letter to Geralt's entire story, and not exclusively to one romance option. In the wedding part of the Heart and Stone DLC, Vladmir's ghost in Geralt's body is supposed to take part in various activities around the area until midnight. There's diving, drinking, dancing, and all sorts of things. But there is a pretty cool fact that I feel like most Gwent masters have missed. In the Gwent activity near the hut, if you lose, Geralt has to wear horse ears for the rest of the night, which obviously looks stupid, and the halflings even laugh at him. However, this humiliation isn't just limited to this certain activity. Every encounter you have afterwards, someone is sure to make fun of your arse ears, like the juggler you saved from the dog, or the in-laws, and even Shani at the end of the quest. It's pretty funny and sits really well with what Vladimir had Geralt do throughout the night. I accidentally forfeited the Gwent game and was surprised with this little detail. The final fight with the Wild Hunt was originally supposed to happen in Novigrad. The city would have been frozen during an attack from the Wild Hunt, with Nilfgaardian and Redanian armies aiding in the chaos as well. But this entire scene was scrapped due to limitations of the engine at the time, which is why it was taken from Novigrad to Skellige. I don't really know what would have been a better ending location, but it sure would have been epic seeing a town like Novigrad turn into a battlefield. In Blood and Wine, the devs wanted to showcase their latest capabilities by making the Beauclair vampire attack scene. They definitely did an amazing job with it. This makes me wonder what Witcher 4 has in store for us with their latest engine. That scrap of a Wild Hunt finale makes you wonder, what other content did CDPR cut before release? Turns out, a lot. Since there's so much cut content, of course some good quest lines got cut in the process. Let me quickly take you through some of them. In a cut quest titled A Friendly Freak, Geralt was supposedly called a freak by some young boys in a village. After confronting them, the boys invite Geralt to their secret spot, a treehouse with some dummy targets. Upon arriving, Geralt was supposed to shoot targets thrown by the kids in midair and use magic signs on dummies. Seeing this, the kids would have been impressed by his Witcher skills. However, if the player was to use Ard or Igni sign on the boys, the quest would have failed. The quest has some branching dialogues, like a kid asking Geralt if he can become a Witcher, to which the players could have either said no and make the kid cry, or tell him to wait till he's grown up. The award for the quest? A bag of cookies that Geralt would later give to Uma. It's not an action-packed quest, sure, but it would have been a warm, wholesome, and much-needed break from all the fighting. The devs didn't finalize what would be the end for the quest. They had several ideas in mind, one of which was that a monster would attack during Geralt's demonstration. Another quest I really wish I had gotten to play during my first Witcher 3 run was Whispers Under the Bridge, in which Geralt would encounter a water hag who asks if he can bring her husband, claiming he cheated on her 10 years ago. She tells a story of being dragged into the waters by drowners while on her way to confront her husband and his mistress, and that her only thought is revenge. As with classic Witcher 3 quests, you would have gotten a choice: do what she says, or decline and kill her. If you decide to help her, Geralt would confront the man, only to learn that the husband's actual wife died 5 years ago, and is buried in a nearby churchyard. Who's telling the truth? That's up to you to decide. However, if the players were to bring the husband to the water hag, then she would have dragged him into the water and disappear. It would have been revealed later that the water hag was actually the mistress, not the wife. The man's real wife had no idea about any of this and died some years later. I honestly think this is a wasted potential. It would have been definitely fun to play. Sounds like a toned-down version of the Whispering Hillock quest, though I don't know if I would have even completed this given my hate for water hags is never-ending. But not every cut quest involved blood and killings. Some were rather funny, which could have added more charm to Geralt's character, like The Edge of Acting, where one of Dandelion's ballads is being turned into a play. But the actor who's meant to play a Sylvan, a devil-looking monster, has gone missing. In this hour of need, Dandelion asks Geralt to find the actor. Unfortunately, Geralt discovers the man has already passed away, dooming the play before it even started. Dandelion and the director panic, looking for a new actor. Luckily for them, the ultimate actor is right there, Geralt. Well, they don't really like the idea either, but have no choice. The players can then take part in the play and answer with the correct lines or not. If you did a good job, Geralt receives a trophy for his act. If not, the crowd boos and leaves. Dandelion calls it a bad idea. There's no blood, no action, and no mortal consequences in this. However, seeing Geralt act or fumble his role would have been a good time for sure. Some other quests weren't really that big or long, just a few minutes of content, like the Until Death Do, where Geralt finds two corpses, a man and a woman on top of a hill. After investigating a bit, players would have found their cause of death, which was poison, along with the information that both were married to different people. After finding the other half of each corpse, Geralt learns that each significant other ran from the home with the savings of their spouses. After some dialogue, you were supposed to find some coins at locations hinted at by the halves. This entire quest was supposed to take 10 to 15 minutes to complete. At the end, you would have received a little reward and later on found out that both the man and the woman started dating. A coincidence? I don't even know at this point. In Freshwater, Geralt explores a fisherman's hut when suddenly a young man barges in, scared like he's about to be killed. Geralt asks why he's so spooked, to which the young man replies that he was out collecting water from a well and got chased by a Noonwraith. Hearing this, players could have either killed the Noonwraith or left. If the players were to choose the latter, they would have found the young man dead in the hut later. However, for the sake of this fact, let's go out and kill the Noonwraith. After killing it, Geralt goes to the well and finds a skeleton, possibly the origin of the Noonwraith. On the skeleton, Geralt was supposed to find a bracelet, which he uses to find whoever it belonged to, since it was necessary to find someone who knew the dead person, so that Geralt could banish the Noonwraith. The quest would then take players to a herbalist who instantly recognizes the bracelet, saying it belonged to her sister who disappeared some time ago. Geralt then tells her what happened. Doing this would result in the well being curse-free and accessible to the villagers. I know the game has great quests, like I love every single one of them, but having one or two more quests like these in some random village would have surely added so much life to parts of the map. But I guess it's not easy to add everything good into a game, and maybe we might just see some of these in Witcher 4. I certainly hope so. There is a similar quest in the game that kinda acts as a tutorial on how witches handle their hunts. It's the very first Witcher contract in Velen called Devil in the Well, which acts similarly to the cut quest. Villagers have a problem with a Noonwraith, and Geralt accepts the contract to kill it, only this time there is no fisherman and no herbalist sister, though there is still a bracelet that you can find which ties the Noonwraith to the well, but other than that, there is no stronger meaning behind the item. It's obvious that they used the cut quest as an inspiration and replaced it. Okay, this next one is kind of confusing. Not really. You'll understand what I mean in just a second, so stay with me. In a cut quest called No Man's Land, Geralt would have been hired by a farmer named Todd to clear his field of necrophages, and would have been told to only collect payment from only him after the work is done. But once the field was clear, a different farmer by the name of Dob would have appeared and thanked Geralt for all the work. Dob would have even offered him a reward for his skill. You then would have gotten a choice on whether to accept the payment or not, but by this time, Dob would have run off, seeing Todd come back to the field. Todd would have then asked Geralt what Dob wanted, to which Geralt could either tell him or not, depending on past choices. But anyhow, Todd would have told Geralt about a new Nilfgaardian rule that stated farmers can lose their land to another if the other farmer pays for the work done on the land, which is why Dob was insisting on Geralt to take the reward. Next, you would have had to confess whether you took the money or not. If you confessed to taking the money, Todd could have been found drinking in a tavern and engaged you in a fist fight when you entered, and if you decided not to take the money, Dob would have been the one drinking in the tavern. This hurts my brain just reading, but it would have been a catchy little fun side quest, and I'm always down to fist fight. There is one other quest that probably would have been a fan favorite if it hadn't been cut at the last moment, which involved Geralt infiltrating the Wild Hunt to find an object that can help in the search for Ciri. Geralt would have disguised himself as one of the riders and boarded the Naglfar, which I think would have been the coolest setting in a quest. The devs made a huge dialogue tree and implanted choices into the quest, so that if Geralt gave a wrong answer to a member of the Wild Hunt, or somehow failed to keep a low profile, the quest would have ended. But even after selecting the characters, the disguise, and making dialogues, for one reason or another, the devs removed it. Now, why do I think this would have been the coolest quest in the game? Well, mainly because no matter how good the game is, and no matter how many times I play it, I always feel like something is missing, a lack of a proper backstory for the Wild Hunt. I think this quest would have been the perfect opportunity to give the players an insight into who the Wild Hunt really is and how they go from world to world. Some cut content can be restored via mods. The best one would be the Brothers in Arms mod, which restores a lot of small cutscenes, dialogues, and even quests. If you really want to experience all the hidden details, go for it. We've talked enough about cut quests. How about I tell you a few quick details instead? At one point in development, Uma was going to be called Prune, but was later changed to the ugliest man alive, which is very sad, but considering it was ultimately Avalak, I guess I don't mind the name. A shovel was to be a secondary weapon in the Hearts of Stone DLC, but was cut from the game just before its release. The devs say there are still small Easter eggs in the game that have yet to be discovered, one of which is CDPR's narrative lead, Marcin Blacker's favorite. In an interview, he said, "To be honest, my favorite of those tiny little funny things, those Easter eggs, are still a secret. As far as I know, they aren't discovered yet. They're really tough to discover, so I won't talk about them. God knows what sorcery they use to hide these Easter eggs, because it's been over a decade since the game was released. Some puzzles and mysteries were intentionally made almost impossible to solve, so that players make a community dedicated to those secrets and work together. CDPR initially started working on the game with 100 people, but as their ideas grew and more complex work was being added to the game, the company increased its size to 250 people by the end. This is why a lot of content was cut, and there were delays before release. Novigrad in The Witcher 3 is one of the biggest cities in gaming. Compare it to Fallout 4 and Dragon Age, and you'll see how massive it is. But did you know Novigrad in the books is almost 3 to 4 times bigger than The Witcher 3 one? Of course, due to limitations in the engine, they can't make a city this big, but maybe in Witcher 4, we'll see glimpses of even bigger cities. When you learn all 12 potion formulas, you'll get an achievement called Let's Cook, which is a reference to Breaking Bad. CDPR was worried that the story wouldn't fit well in an open world setting. They made the story initially for the linear world, like Witcher 2, and even planned on only having a linear world. The Witcher 3 contains over 1 million lines of code, 1,135,617 to be exact. This number, however, isn't final due to the release of the 2 DLCs. The reason Witcher 3's combat feels so satisfying and fluid is that CDPR hired a professional swordsman to motion capture Geralt's moves. The swordsman they hired is said to have this dance-like quality when swinging a sword, which you can also notice in the game. Andrzej Sapkowski, the author of the Witcher novels, had limited involvement in the game since CDPR had bought the rights and expanded on their own. However, CDPR respects the work of Sapkowski and has publicly said that they update things to ensure the game stays coherent with the books. The Al Ghul scream is actually a modified sound of pigs squealing, dogs barking, and distorted human breaths. The team experimented with multiple sounds before finally going with the one in the game. In the quest, The Warble of the Smitten Knight from the Blood and Wine DLC, Vivian de Tabas is cured of a bird disease, but is said to have only 7 years left to live. If you meditate for 2,555 days, which is 7 years in-game, Vivian will die in Caer Trolda Harbour. Is it weird that I don't find this one to be surprising? It's an amazing Easter egg, don't get me wrong, but that's the kind of thing I now expect from The Witcher 3. The thing is, this came out 7 years after the game's release. Someone really thought to just meditate in-game for 7 years and see what happens. It's not common to find new Easter eggs even after many years, like the CDPR Needs You poster that was found after 9 years under Novigrad. CDPR's discarded 90% of the quests that are pitched, only keeping the best of the best for the final release. Now you know why each quest feels like a masterpiece. If you kept Geralt's neck tattoo in Witcher 2 and imported the save file to Witcher 3, Geralt keeps that tattoo in this game as well. A pretty lovely and small detail to keep fans happy. The arrow to the knee is probably one of the biggest memes in the RPG genre, which of course belongs to Skyrim. But The Witcher 3 gives us a different perspective on this meme by telling us who shot the arrows. The black infantry archer carding Gwent has the description, "I aim for the knee, always," which I think is hilarious, and a creative way to pay your respects to one of the biggest RPGs to ever exist. There is another subtle nod to the same meme, and it's pretty easy to miss. During the quest, Whatsoever a Man Soweth, in the Hearts of Stone DLC, Shani will take Geralt to Oxenfurt University, where she'll run into 2 guards guarding the door, and as it turns out, Shani helped one of the guards with an injury, which was, you guessed it, an arrow to the knee injury. The Wild Hunts are ANL elves whose world was destroyed by the White Frost. They hop between worlds to raid other inhabitable places, and their goal to capture Ciri was proposed by Eredin to fight off the White Frost with the powers of the Elder Blood. They use magic to modify their voice and wear armor made up of bones so they look more spectral, and strike fear into worlds they visit. A false Ciri was supposed to appear in Skellige under the name Becca. Would this have played out well for the story? I mean, the plot is already pretty big, and maybe adding a fake Ciri would have taken away what little time we had with the actual Ciri, but it is a pretty cool concept, and it's taken from the books. Another character that was supposed to appear in Velen was the Inquisitor, who would have been a high-ranking Witcher hunter. In some kind of encounter, we as Geralt were supposed to either spare him or kill him. However, I don't really know why he was taken out, but he was most likely changed later to Graydon. If you go out of bounds using some camera glitch or exploit in the Blood and Wine DLC, you can find a picture of CDPR's dev team placed on top of a mountain. The Witcher 3 script is longer than the Lord of the Rings trilogy, with over 450,000 words and more than 950 speaking roles. All of this took 2.5 years to complete, making it one of the longest voiceover projects ever attempted. You can find Leo's grave near Kaer Morhen. If you don't know who Leo is, he was an orphan Witcher from Witcher 1 who was undergoing Witcher training, but died during the attack on Kaer Morhen. We all remember our first reaction to seeing Novigrad, a city full of life. But did you know it has over 2,000 interactive doors? This is huge even for today's standards. Every dark alley and market has interactive doors that lead you to a quest, an interior, or a hidden area. The city itself is heavily inspired by late medieval European cities, especially Venice, according to CDPR. While in Novigrad, visit Triss's home. It's all messed up, lifted from one side, and is even tilted a bit due to all the tunnels that run underneath the house. If you go inside, you'll feel the tilt I'm talking about. And interestingly, if you get to the very top where Triss sleeps, you'll see that she has boxes underneath her bed, so that it lies straight and doesn't tilt like the building itself. And during your visit to Triss's home, you're likely going to notice all the writing on the walls outside. If you look at them without any knowledge, they don't really give any explanation. And in my first playthrough, I thought there was some kind of magic marks, you know, considering Triss is a mage. However, this isn't the case. These writings are from the people of Novigrad, who really hate anyone who's not a normal human. 2 of these writings are in English, calling Triss scumbag and sorceresses are whores. The other 2 are in Polish, roughly also translating to whore and witch. It shows how difficult it is for any other race other than humans to live in Novigrad, always in fear of either being killed by a mob or burned to death in the town square. You may think Putrid Grove only has 2 paths to enter, but there is a secret path under Novigrad's Glory Gate. You have to swim into the sewers, kill some drowners, and grab the key off a body to open the gate that leads to Putrid Grove. It's more dangerous this way because you encounter the King of Beggars' men who, I guess, use this path for themselves. Skellige is derived from the word Gaelic skellig, which translates to rocks, and cliff, which kinda is the basic summary of the region. In the quest Where Cat and Wolf Play, the dialogue will change when you approach Gaetan, depending on what armor you have equipped. If you wear normal armor, he will say, "Ah, fellow Witcher, well, small world." But if you approach him wearing the feline set, he'll say, well, what do we have here? Feline armor, wolf's head medallion. Crossbreed? Triss in Witcher 3 is very different from Witcher 2 and 1. She is sweet, has cute energy, and is more ladylike, if you know what I mean. Whereas in the other two games, she was simply mean and vengeful for no reason. I do see her like that in Witcher 3 sometimes as well, especially when you mention the name Yennefer. In the secondary quest of Skellige, called Fist of Fury, Geralt faces the champion of Skellige, who is a bear called Olaf. If you beat him with your fist, you win Gwestog, a steel sword of relic tier. That's crazy, but there is another fight that is cooler and harder. Once you win the Fist of Fury in all three regions, a man will approach Geralt and offer him to compete in the ultimate fist fighting tournament called Champion of Champions, where you get to fist fight a troll. You heard that right. It's actually really hard to do. But what's even crazier is the fact that if you win, you achieve the Brawl Master achievement. But if you lose, you can't redo the fight, losing the chance to ever obtain that achievement. Most players have no idea, but you can actually pet Roach. Groundbreaking stuff, I know. If you approach Roach from any of his sides and hold the jump button, Geralt will pet Roach like the wonderful and dumb horse that she is, though the animation varies on which side you approach her from. In Hearts of Stone, there are multiple instances where you can spot Gauntero Dim in the background, including the wedding, in the Redanian army, and many other places. He was always watching Geralt and Vladimir like a creep. Oof. Alright, let's take it easy now. No need to rush. You're still awake, right? Most people have no idea, but you can actually encounter the Lady of the Lake in the Blood and Wine DLC. For fans who only played Witcher 3, the Lady of the Lake was the one who gave Geralt Erendite, his legendary silver sword in the first game, so it's obviously a pretty big deal to see her reappear. In the quest, there can only be one. Geralt needs to pass a trial and fight the hermit near Lac Calavi. The hermit will tell you the lore of the sword and will even say he knows you. Once you prove your strength to him by fighting, a beautiful cutscene will play. The Lady of the Lake will appear from underwater, talk to Geralt, and give him Erendite. She even says not to lose it this time, which is a clear reference to previous games. Of course, the sword has been upgraded to the Witcher 3 standards, so naturally, it is one of the best swords in the game. This entire encounter is a reward from CDPR to fans who have stuck with the series since the start. During this epic cutscene, the Lady of the Lake hums a beautiful melody that data miners have confirmed to be an audio made specifically for this quest. However, there's no explanation of what the melody is even about. CDPR has left it intentionally mysterious, so it can provide a dreamlike experience during the cutscene, which it certainly did. This moment is unforgettable, but Witcher 3 has plenty of other memorable moments, some a lot more personal. I'm sure your first couple of playthroughs had you running after either Yennefer or Triss, and I don't blame you. They're both gorgeous. But there are other romance options that most players have no idea about. While Yen and Triss are the primary options and have a huge storyline just dedicated to them, you can go out and explore some secondary options as well. Some of these are one-quest rodeos, meaning you don't have to put much energy into getting that bed scene you've been wanting to see, and some are as simple as entering an interior, like the brothels, where you're free to choose your pick, and none of the other romance options will think much of it. Now, I've always been faithful to the beautiful black sorceress Yennefer, but the brothels in Witcher 3 are really tempting. How often have I visited them? Let's just move on. There are a total of 3 brothels: Crippled Kate's and the Passiflora in Novigrad, and the Bells of Beauclair in Toussaint. A fun little fact about Crippled Kate is that you can find a woman there who mutters,
"It's a material world, and I'm a material girl,"
which is a reference to Madonna. The other romance options are Sasha, who falls in love with Geralt after watching his impressive Gwent skills, Jada Andiman, who's called an Iron Maiden and only understands love through fistfights, Beto once in the quest Iron Maiden, and she falls in love with the handsome White Wolf. Do keep in mind her voice actor is the same as Yennefer. Coincidence? I don't know, but I would love to listen to that voice all day. Shani, who's a bit difficult to interact with, but ultimately falls in love with Geralt in a Midnight Clear quest. where you can give her a gift to cheer her up, and choose some smooth dialogue options like a true poet. This will trigger the infamous boat scene, which I really don't want to explain because of YouTube's guidelines, but you get the idea. Sylvia, in the Blood and Wine DLC, can have her way with you in the quest Beyond Hill and Dale, only if you allow her, of course, which I'm sure you will. And the last, but definitely not the least, Kira Metz, who will invite you to a candlelit dinner in her quest Favor for a Friend. Just pick a simple dialogue, find her after she disappears, and that's it. Doug Cockle, the voice behind Geralt, said that one of the weirdest and most awkward experiences he had while voicing Geralt was doing the sex scenes for The Witcher 3. He describes the feeling as when your mum walks in while you're masturbating. I can only imagine how awkward it must be in the booth when directors and producers are watching you moan and make weird noises. On God, I'd never do that in a million years. Props to Doug though, he did make some authentic sounds for romance. If you win the Knights tournament in the Blood and Wine DLC, Geralt will receive some rewards and a fangirl who follows you around and cheers for you whenever you are in the tournament grounds. You can find her near Geralt's tent. I don't believe a lot of players have actually seen this detail since the Knights tournament isn't necessary to complete for the side quest The Warble of Smitten Knight, but it's one of the more wholesome details. I won't complain, and yes, she doesn't follow you literally everywhere on the map, only on the tournament grounds. There is a small little detail linked with one of Kira Metz's quests that I feel is pretty interesting and very easily missable. During the side quest A Tower Full of Mice, you interact with a ghost named Annabelle that sends you to find her lover Graham. The missable part is when you find Graham in Velen and tell him about Annabelle. You can spot a tied noose in the background, suggesting that he was about to end his life after Annabelle died. Damn, Velen is cursed in every single possible way. I'd hate to live there. I mean, the villagers do as well, so I guess it's natural. If you go through Yennefer's quarters in Skellige, there are a handful of belongings Geralt can examine, one of which is her scented lilac and gooseberries perfume, a reference to the same distinctive scent she had when she was first introduced in Sikowski's novels. Early in the game, if you remember, Geralt hands over Yennefer's letter to Vesemir, to which he says, "It does smell like lilac and gooseberries," which is obviously another nod to the same reference. For someone who only plays Witcher 3, this amounts to nothing, but for someone like me who has seen, played, and read everything Witcher has, this definitely warms my heart. In the same letter, Yennefer wrote that she still has that same stuffed unicorn, and by the next dialogue option, you'll realize it's a not safe for work thing. Fast forward to the King is Dead, Long Live the King quest. During the romance scene between Geralt and Yennefer, she will bring that life-sized unicorn to the screen. I know it's a sketchy topic to talk about, but it's not something that the devs put randomly. It's actually another reference to Yennefer in Sikowski's books, where she likes to make love on a unicorn's back. You can even find the same unicorn in Yen's room, which serves as a reminder of Geralt and Yen's unique bond. Kind of. Props to the devs for referencing the legendary books, just not in the way anyone expected, but still pretty cool, I'd say. But the next secret goes far beyond fan service, and it's a clue to Ciri's destiny. Most players have trouble choosing which ending is the best, but since Witcher 4's trailer dropped, we at least know that Ciri becoming a Witcher in the end was the true ending all along. But what if I told you this was hinted by the devs in the Heart and Stone DLC? If you complete the DLC before ending the base game, you get to ask Gaunter O'Dim about Ciri and her location, to which he replies that there are several things he cannot meddle with. However, he does tell you how to achieve the best ending. He asks Geralt to remember a few things, which are that there will come a time when Ciri will come to Geralt defeated, and in that time, Geralt must find a way to make her laugh. This is, of course, hinting towards playing Snowball with Ciri in the base game after Vesemir's funeral. Then he tells Geralt that there will come a time when someone betrays her, and to let her vent her rage, which is a hint towards letting Ciri destroy Avalak's lab. He'll then tell Geralt that there will come a time when she'll grieve for a friend, grieve with her, a hint towards visiting Skull's grave, which can be missed by a lot of players, given that there is no obvious quest marker suggesting you do so. And finally, he will tell Geralt that that there will come a time when fear will engulf her, instill courage in her, but don't act in her stead, which is the hint towards letting Syrric talk to the Lodge of Sorceresses alone. Now this is the type of foreshadowing I can get behind. Gaunter O'Dim is one of, if not the strongest character in the Witcher franchise. It's good for Geralt that Gaunter enjoys playing games more than battling it out traditionally, because there is no timeline in Witcher where Geralt can beat him in a fight. Now this made me think, who else can Geralt fight 1v1 and maybe lose? Of course, there are plenty of characters that fit this criteria, but I'm only talking about The Witcher 3. Originally, Geralt was supposed to fight Avallac'h after Eredin. The whole ending still points toward it, but was cut for unknown reasons. It leaves us to wonder how Geralt would have fought this insanely powerful elven mage, and whether he would even be able to come out alive. I don't really mind this boss fight being cut from the end, because I think Eredin is a great final boss. But obviously I would have loved to test my skills against a foe of his level, maybe even as a training fight in Kaer Morhen. However, the Unseen Elder from the Blood and Wine DLC can shred Geralt in seconds. He's a powerful ancient vampire who is the supreme leader of the vampire community in Toussaint. But how do we know he beats Geralt easily? Well, in a conversation with him in the DLC, if you choose the wrong dialogue, he kills Geralt in the blink of an eye. That's how insanely powerful he is. And a bonus fun fact, the Unseen Elder from the DLC is an original concept by CDPR. He's not taken from the books. However, the concept of higher powerful vampires is inspired by Sikowski's work. The reason Geralt is so different from other witches is that he went through extra enhanced mutations during his training as a witcher. What's even cooler is that he was the only candidate to make it out alive. Every other witcher died during those trials, and his white hair is a direct side effect of the extra mutations. Not only that, but Geralt is way older than he seems. You'd say he looks in his 30s or even 40s, but in reality, the extra witcher mutations slowed his aging processes, and in reality, the White Wolf is close to a century old in Witcher 3. But let me shift the momentum towards some rather interesting hidden facts in Velen. So Velen is cursed. We all know that. The first time we enter it, seeing all the dead bodies and encountering every ugly creature that the game has to offer, tells us what to expect. But there is so much more happening that I'm sure you never even noticed. In the very first quest in Velen, the Nilfgaardian Connection, when you come close to the Crossroad Inn, you'll notice some distressed NPCs worrying about Baron's men. You'll see one NPC hurrying to slaughter his pig so the Nilfgaardians don't take it. And you'll also see a father telling his daughter to hide in the woods so that the Nilfgaardians don't find her, since it was pretty common for the women there to be brutally assaulted. Now, given the entire context of the area, in the first playthrough, these NPCs just seem to be there to give you an impression of what Velen has become, but there is so much more. If you decide not to kill the Baron's men, you'll later find them outside the inn next to that father, telling him what they will do once they find his daughter. Of course, talking about how they'll pass her around before ending her life. A lot of players say that if you go into the woods, you'll find the daughter who ran away dead, but I wasn't able to find her, so I'm not really sure about this one. There was a woman dead on the road, but it's highly unlikely to be the daughter in question. This isn't the only time these bandits prowled on someone's daughter. If you spare them and listen to their conversation in the inn, you'll hear them talk about a father who dressed his daughter as a boy so that no one touches her, but the bandits found out and still ended up raping her. They even joke about what the father must have felt like when he heard about this evil act. This can be missed easily, only because these bandits are super annoying. And I really don't think many people spare them. No Manland delivers immersion without the need for arrows and quest markers. You can spot many different burned villages, bandit camps, and unscripted events that show how cursed Velen is. But there is one place that describes it better than any other. It's the Forest Hut. Near the Forest Hut signpost, you'll find an isolated hut in the woods. When you reach it, you'll see a hanged man on the tree, and inside the hut, you'll see a dead mother and child. There's no information about what happened besides a vague signpost description that reads, "Though his friends advised against building a house in the middle of the woods, Hans refused to listen and did things his way. When the war broke out and laid waste to the region, Hans and his family lived in peace, untouched by the troubles of the wider world, until one fateful night." This is the only clue as to what happened to the family, leaving the rest for the players to discover. If you notice the hanged man, you'll see his hands are tied and his face is covered, meaning someone else killed him. possibly the bandits that surrounded the area. However, the mother and child have no wounds or signs of attack, likely meaning they took their own life, maybe due to the harsh life they were living or the situation with the war. This claim is further backed by the fact that there are certain types of poisonous flowers on the desk inside the hut. And coincidentally, Kira's house is also nearby with the same type of flowers, leading players to believe she gave the mother and her child an easy way out. Velen is a cruel place to live, no doubt about it, with so many women being raped, children being kidnapped, and men being brutally murdered. It was only a matter of time before this cruelty reached the hut. It's sad, but it's also a pretty cool little detail that players can figure out on their own. The human stew that the crones eat is actually foreshadowed before you even meet the crones. NPCs near Crookback Bog can be heard whispering the word offering, and if you go inside their huts, you can find human bones, cooking pots, and children's belongings that suggest cannibalistic practices. These were the so-called offerings they were presenting to the witches. None of this is quest related, it's just the beautiful background storytelling of Velen. In the same area, you can find a tapestry of the crones, given to them by their followers, made up of children's hair. It's grim, but the art itself is actually really beautiful. If you go close to it, or just stay in the room after the cutscene that plays once you go there for the first time, Geralt will hear faint whispering sounds which belong to the crones, since they use the tapestry to observe the villagers. It's a pretty neat detail that I feel like most players miss. And if you think that's disturbing, wait until you step into Toussaint. There is one hidden detail in Toussaint that is scary, but definitely worth checking out. There's an abandoned olive garden where the sun doesn't shine. Once you go there, you'll find a lady standing alone in a red robe, not speaking a word. Now, this encounter itself is pretty creepy, and Geralt also says that something isn't right here. But if you go to the lady, you'll see a mutilated corpse next to her with a diary that you can read. As soon as you read this diary and try to leave, the lady will turn into a Bruxa. Yes, the same one from A Night to Remember trailer of The Witcher 3. It turns out the Bruxa was in an affair with a girl named Sephora, and the person who died was Sephora's husband. The Bruxa killed him out of jealousy. Once you kill the demon, the sun starts shining on the area. The scream that woman makes before turning into the Bruxa scared me enough to pause, but it's a good fight and a cool little hidden detail. Just like the next fact about Gauntar and the Isle of Mist dwarves. If you achieve the Witcher-S ending, you can meet the dwarves from the Isle of Mist once more near the White Orchid. After a bit of chat, a few soldiers will show up, accusing the dwarves of stealing a golden chalice. If you decide to help the dwarves, they'll tell you they actually sold the chalice to someone named Mr. Mirrory. It's a cheeky little nod to Gauntar and to Hearts of Stone. As far as I know, there isn't really any knowledge about the chalice itself or why Gauntar wanted it. I guess it's just a little catch that the devs implanted in the game, and I'm certainly not going to complain. I love the DLC and the Gauntar is just amazing. There's a pretty cool little theory surrounding him as well. The Bloody Baron and Donar both have a pretty cool little story about Uma. Donar will tell Geralt that he sold Uma to a merchant, and the Bloody Baron will also tell him that he bought Uma from a merchant. Still, the thing is, Uma is such a major character that one would think the game will later bring this so-called merchant somewhere in the story, especially when both Donar and Bloody Baron talk of him as someone important to the plot. But weirdly, there's no information, which brings this cool little theory to the table. What if Gauntar O'Dim was secretly helping Geralt? He refers to himself as a merchant, he travels the continent, and most importantly, he loves playing games, which backs Bloody Baron's story of how he won Uma. But these are not the only details that tie him to this theory. There is another little detail as well. Whenever Gauntar's name is in the dialogue, someone is sure to say devil, devilish, or something along these lines. There are multiple instances of this happening, and it just happens that the Bloody Baron uses the word devilish during his dialogue of how he won Uma. Given how discreet the references are in the game, I don't think this theory is out of the question. Exlatalis does a great deep dive of the entire topic. I suggest watching his video on it as well. There's a quest in The Witcher 3 where you can meet someone pretending to be a witcher. The village will send you after him when they realize the bastard has impregnated the alderman's daughter. Curious Geralt tries to find this scammer, who can be found near a cemetery terrified of a ghoul. Once you kill the ghoul, the villagers will appear, asking about the details of the wannabe witcher. You can either tell the truth or lie to save the scammer's neck. If you do tell the truth, the scammer will be judged for his crimes, which mostly results in his death, but you can also try convincing the villagers to forgive him. However, what's interesting is that you can back his lies and force him to work for the village. If you come back later, you'll see him working in the fields, picking up buckets and doing other chores, all while wearing a Witcher medallion. The quest is called Witcher Wannabe, and is kind of a much needed break from all the evil in the continent. This fact is sure lighthearted compared to the next few facts, some of which are an emotional punch to the heart, so gather your strength. Have you ever released a demon into the world? If not, then you're lucky, because at the end of the Heart of Stone DLC, you'll get a chance to break into the Oxenfurt University with Shani, and meet a professor who will give you some information on various topics. But what's interesting is that you'll spot a pentagram in the room, just like the one in Iris Olgerd's memories, suggesting both come from the same person. If you go ahead and put out all the candles on the pentagram, you'll hear the ominous sound of an entity being released to the world. The sound itself is pretty terrifying, but it's the thought that Gaunter O'Dimm's probably planted a demon inside the circle that haunts me. The same professor dies when he steps out of his protective circle, which was placed there by Gaunter, assuring Professor safety if he stays inside. What's interesting is that you can read his journal, where he's written some disturbing, torturous methods Gaunter O'Dimm used on him for the past year. One of which was that when inside the protective circle, he would have nightmares that made him fear sleep. But then came a time that he started dreaming of a 10-year-old daughter. For the professor, this was strange since he never had any children. Yet he says he had great parental love for her in the dreams. As the journal continues, the professor says that he sees his daughter daily and enjoys spending time with her so much that now he no longer fears sleep, but is always waiting for the time to sleep. The journal continues with how his daughter is clever, joyful, and will become a good woman when she grows up. The professor even thinks Gaunter is done playing with his mind and is maybe at peace. Until now, the journal hasn't mentioned anything about the circle. But as soon as the professor writes about leaving it, his daughter dies in the next dream, due to an illness that pocked her whole body with hideous oozing sores. She kept on begging her father to do something, but he could only watch as she died in his arms. The professor puts all the blame on Gaunter and says that he wishes for a completely blind vision compared to the horrible dreams Gaunter has been showing him. Countess Mignol and Vesemir are both lovers, but most players meet her in Hearts of Stone after Vesemir's death, when Geralt breaks the news of Vesemir's death to her just before Brosodi's auction. What most players don't know is that if you meet her before progressing the base game, Geralt tells her that Vesemir is alive and well. Furthermore, you can talk to Vesemir and Kaer Morhen after encountering her and ask if he plans on meeting her, to which Vesemir will say yes, once the battle is over. We all know his demise, which is why this whole interaction is sweet and sad. Imagine the reaction of someone who has no idea of Vesemir's funeral and listens to this entire conversation before progressing through the main story. Honestly, they might be scarred for life. By now, I'm sure you know that each quest in Witcher 3 has some kind of consequence or result left on the map, and oftentimes you can see these effects if you visit certain areas on the map. A good example of this is the side quest Missing in Action, where you accept a contract to find Dune's brother, Bastion. Dune will lead you to a battlefield with multiple dead soldiers and ask you to find a Temerian shield with flowers drawn on it. After searching here and there with no luck, Hussar, Dune's dog, will smell something and run towards the forest. If you follow the dog, you'll find a hut, and as soon as you approach it, a cutscene will play, in which you'll see Bastion wounded, and along him a Nilfgaardian soldier who Bastion says helped him reach the hut. Bastion asks Dune to take the Nilfgaardian soldier with him to the village. Of course, this is a difficult choice for Dune to make, simply because Nilfgaardians are the bad guys for him, so this ultimately comes down for Geralt to choose. If Geralt chooses to leave the soldier behind, you can find his corpse later in the same hut, but if Geralt chooses to help him, you can later find that soldier living with Dune and Bastion disguised as a peasant. There's one more thing I really love about this quest, is that if you don't take the contract and just go straight to the hut where the soldier and Bastion are, you'll still find them there, and the question will start. However, this time, your goal isn't to find Bastion, it's actually to find Dune and tell them about the hut. But there is a sad little twist if you do it this way. And that is, after you complete the quest and head back to the hut, you'll find the soldier dead. You know why? Because remember, I told you the Nilfgaardians were the bad guys in the eyes of Dune. Well, since Geralt wasn't there to make a decision, Dune decided to just leave the soldier to his demise. Now tell me this isn't the coolest detail you've ever experienced in a video game. This side quest was based on a cut quest, and some might say this cut quest would have been more emotional than the one we got. The name of the quest was Missing Son, in which Geralt would have run into a woman looking for a son on the battlefield. She asks Geralt to look for a specific Temerian shield, just like in the Brothers in Arms. However, this one had a pretty sad ending. You see, Geralt would find the shield the mother is looking for, but not on the battlefield, but rather in the forest next to it. Geralt would have found a boy's corpse with a Temerian arrow in the back, leading to the conclusion that the mother's child probably tried to desert the battle and was killed by one of his own. The next part would have been even more heartbreaking, as Geralt could have either told the mother that he couldn't find the boy, or told her the truth that her son didn't die an honorable death and was killed for running from the battle. This is the kind of quest that sticks with you. Now, you tell me, which was the better one between the two? I don't mind the one we have right now, because at times you need a light-hearted quest. But the emotional depth of this cut quest would have had my eyes in tears. You know what quest CDPR worked on first for The Witcher 3? It was the Lord of Undervik, in which Geralt helps Hjalmar on Crate and his friends kill the ice giant. The objectives in this quest are not clear, and the area where you're supposed to search overlaps with each other. But the main thing that kind of shows this was an early development quest is that you can miss entire sections of content and even reach the end without doing anything else. I've done this multiple times. I go out to find Hjalmar, but instead I find the ice giant and miss all the content. At first, I thought this was all the quest had to offer, but if you do this quest right, you'll find the horn wall, a horn that drops sirens from the sky, rescue Folan and Vigi before the ending fight so they can aid you against the giant, and also be by your side in the final battle of Kaer Morhen. Since we're in Skellige again, let me remind you that there is a quest in the region that is easily missable, and I bet many of you who have done multiple playthroughs also haven't completed this one. It's called Crime and Punishment, which can be triggered once you are way north in Skellige. You'll find a man named Jorg chained to a rock, left to be eaten by harpies. However, you can save him and hear how he got there. Jorg will tell you that he's being punished by the village for killing a man, and swears he didn't do it. If you go to the nearby village, you'll see a funeral being held for the victim, and a bunch of mourners who say that Jorg's punishment is not severe enough. Listening to this, a little girl breaks down and runs to the forest. If you follow her and talk to her, she'll tell you that the person who died was her uncle, and that she didn't like him, so she told her brother Jorg that the uncle did terrible things to her. Hearing this, Jorg killed the uncle in rage and was punished. You can tell the girl you freed her brother and that he's okay, or tell her what her lie did to the life of a young man. In the quest Fool's Gold, there are a total of 3 possible outcomes, but getting 2 of them is almost impossible. It's the quest where Geralt finds a village inhabited only by pigs, which he later learns are actually humans that have been cursed into pigs. One of the quest objectives is to gather the pigs in a herd and lead them to a temple where Geralt will undo the curse. Now, this is the same objective that should lead to different endings, since during this, you're supposed to protect the pigs against neckers, a pretty simple task. But one would think it should be hard to protect each pig, especially since there are so many of them. But the strange fact is that these neckers don't really attack the pigs, they just attack you. This kills the point of the objective, meaning if no pigs die, you don't get the other 2 endings, and if Geralt is out of their sight, they just stand next to the pigs, not even touching them. This is weird because the 3 possible endings are if all pigs survive, if only a few survive, and if only one pig survives. NPCs are meant to have different dialogues in the final cutscene depending on what ending you got. But since no pig can actually die, you always get the good ending. There is, however, another way to achieve the ending, which is to kill the pigs yourself. I was able to do it using Igni, but I'm sure there are other ways to do so as well. If you've played enough, you've probably seen the good ending where the villagers do a head count on how many survive, and are kind of happy with the results. But what are the other 2 endings like? Well, if only a few pigs survive, when the villagers do the head count, they will say,
"Not many of us left."
and blame it on Geralt for not helping everyone. In the last ending, in which only one pig survives, the villagers will frantically yell out,
Just 3 of us?
and blame Geralt for not saving any other humans. These are just small changes in dialogue that I think most of you haven't heard, or maybe had no idea if there was even more than one ending. But I bet you're wondering what happens if no pig survives, right? Well, if you somehow kill every single pig before the cutscene, the game bugs out, and the cutscene doesn't play, ultimately failing the quest. I don't know if the quest is bugged or not, but even after many patch updates, the quest stays this way. In the quest, The Tower Out of Nowheres, set in Skellige, Geralt explores a magical tower that appears out of nowhere. The tower's defense system teleports enemies from random parts of the map to Geralt so that he doesn't proceed. These enemies range from ghouls and gargoyles to werewolves. But what's interesting in this quest is that the final enemy the tower teleports to is actually just a normal cow. The reason I'm mentioning it here is that in one of my playthroughs of this quest, when the cow spawns, which is totally harmless, Geralt says, "What now, you piece of filth?" This adds absolutely nothing to the video, but it's so funny seeing Geralt talk shit to the only creature that can't harm him during the quest. Did you know? If you go near the cursed chapel north of Upper Mill, you'll find a creepy pond with 3 wraiths around it. Once you deal with them, go further into the chapel to face another wraith, before finally investigating the place and finding a letter that is sadder than anything I've read in Witcher 3. The letter is called Eadbert's Farewell Note, which tells a story of him and his beautiful wife Ornesta. The two were happily married, and a year later were blessed with their first daughter, Mildburga, who people said was like an angel and a spitting image of her mother. However, the letter says that although the father was happy, Ornesta seemed a bit off and wouldn't really talk much about her daughter. Then, in the coming years, they were blessed with 2 more daughters named Matilda and Ethel. Same as the first daughter, they both were beautiful. But then again, the mother was not happy at all. The letter even describes an evening where the children were crying, possibly for food, and their mother got angry, saying they have no right to be hungry because they have already eaten her youth and beauty. The letter then states that as the kids grew taller, each time someone would compliment their beauty, Ornesta would sink deeper and deeper into madness. To put it more simply, the mother held onto her beauty and her younger days, but as time passed and her charm faded, she grew resentful and unfairly placed that resentment on her daughters. But now comes part of the letter which is dark and disturbing, but a really amazing storytelling detail. The letter continues by saying that one night the husband woke up to a startling moon and found the hut empty. He ran out and followed a set of bare footprints, leading him to the cemetery of the chapel, where he saw a scene far grimmer than anything he had ever imagined. All 3 of his daughters were dead, lying around the fountain with deep gashes that tore through their once beautiful faces, and with strips of skin and flesh that scattered across the ground. As he witnesses this horrific scene, he notices his wife, who was standing on a stool by a lone tree with a rope draped around her neck, and the final thing she said before ending her life was, "They took it from me, all of it, all I had. All I cherished." The final bit of the letter hints at the fate of the father as well. He mentions that he will soon join his family in the afterlife, and asks the gods to forgive him and his wife Ornesta. Reading this breaks my heart, knowing the 3 wraiths that I killed near the pond were the daughters, and the one inside was their mother. Witcher 3 keeps surprising me with ways I could have never imagined. Who even came up with such a sad and brutal story? But our journey doesn't end there. Now why don't you join me in the world of Skyrim, filled with lore, secrets and facts you will not believe. I'll see you there.